All right, I've got a fairly short video today, but it's an important little linchpin and something I've been thinking about. So basically, I've got three different models for, or three different people: Kierkegaard, Baudrillard, and Hegel, describing something I think in their own language that links between the three of them. So for Kierkegaard, what I've done is I've also added a layer, a level to them on the front end, um, because the Kierkegaard one reminded me that these are stages of life, sort of. So I've added one to the earliest parts of life. So basically, the first list is illusion leads to aesthetic sphere, leads to ethical sphere, leads to religious sphere. That's Kierkegaard, and I added the illusion one. But baby, child, adult, elder. And that life stages will go for all this stuff a little bit. Surreal, real, hyperreal, super real would be Baudrillard. For Hegel, it's dream, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Synthesis. Meaningful order from dull chaos, essentially. Individuals may achieve the last stage until the end of life, or mental illness drives them back to the first stage, also shared by babies. But civilizations go through continual cycles of this whole thing. And it's a combination of a sort of laziness comes about because of the security one feels. Someone doesn't teach the nitty gritty of the hard details because everything's functioning, even though fewer and fewer people that actually need to think about it are thinking about what genuinely the substructures and substrata of meaning and purpose and the whole world's contextual relations, um, for guiding society at large. And what happens is eventually the people that can do it die off somewhat, and the people that can't do it, they just keep at their own level, of course. But what happens is the people that could do it but have not been taught to do it because people got lazy because things were working well, have to redo the whole thing from scratch, essentially, more often than not. And also, another thing is, on top of the decay process, the environmental boundaries shift and change over time due to technology, so to speak. So the relations have to be renegotiated anyways. But it's extra hard because you have to go from scratch using the previous distance of wisdom goers, people who go the distance on wisdom, and they're the snippets you find in history of them. So society is having to rebuild itself essentially over time for the last little while. And I was thinking about it, and one of the things I realized is that vaporwave kind of hit around 2010, 2012 to 2015, 16. And I would honestly put that as the indie sort of niche community signal of the death of culture. And everything is downstream of that initial realization, essentially, in the modern era. And the great struggle that we're facing now is we're beginning to do it, but we have to rebuild culture by integrating with the greats of the past. And find interconnected webs of meaning and purpose and relations, and understand how everything's connected in a grand whole that is awe-inspiring and gives wonder and possibly terror. And that terror bit is why people want to stick their heads in the sands, because also they've been infantilized, which is the first stage of those three lists I gave: the illusion, the dream, and the surreal, the baby. And they haven't learned to learn, and that it is possible to learn, or how to learn. So they're afraid of change and growth and so on, and afraid of other people being more than them, because they think they'll be stuck at the small level if someone gets ahead of them. So it's crabs in the bucket at that first stage. And what one realizes is that this actually matches onto The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, which is that eukaryotic cells were the first innovation that led to cooperation, basically, genetically, on a biological level, billions of years ago. Eukaryotic just means multi-celled. So basically, you'd have one species of bacteria with another species of bacteria, and they would unite, and that would be like a two-cell organism. So it's like a two-man party as opposed to a one-man hero party. Or one-man hero. And then you get 3, and then you get 4 and 5, and it keeps going up and up. And the symbiosis element came about probably after the parasitic element came about. And one of the things I'm almost thinking of actually is that I guess this will be a slightly longer video, but it'll be worth it. One of the things I was thinking about is, what if the global leaders realized we were heading down Mouse Utopia route and tried to instill new blood into a dying race? Literally interbreeding. Yeah. Or subconsciously thought of it that way or something. I'm giving a lot of leeway here with their morality, but you subconsciously had the instincts of that particular notion, right? And the thing is, Mouse Utopia is doomsday for everyone, basically. It's basically Children of Men, the book. And there's an anime that terrified the crap out of me, basically, that made me want to avoid it at all costs, called Texhnolize. Texhnolize. TexhnolYze. And basically what happens is there's two different worlds, or there's an upper world and a lower world on the same planet, I guess. And the upper world is full of ghost people, basically. People who have no will to live. And the underworld is very violent and savage, but it has a will to live, more or less. And the anime is about the failure of both of them in the end, and the death of everyone. It's really depressing in presentation, story, world, themes, plot. It's really depressing. It's meant to be very depressing. And one of the characters that I didn't like much, but now I'm looking at it, I'm kind of like, oh, that makes sense actually. Is there's a guy named Yoshi, and he's pretty early in the story, but he goes down to the underworld and starts making a ruckus and causing chaos and starting a absolute bloodbath by driven people in an effort to prevent what is already inevitable on the current path of that mouse utopia, total doomsday, slow, quiet death of all. And he fails in the end, but he had a smart plan that almost worked. And I mentioned symbiotes came about after parasites. And a symbiote is basically almost a eukaryotic cell, if you know what I mean. A eukaryotic cell is two cells in symbiosis to each other, and so on. Whereas a symbiotic relationship is when two things are separate, but they unite in some fashion, like fish that eat something that grows on whale sharks, and the whale shark doesn't eat them and keeps other predators away from them, and so on. Or like birds pecking at a crocodile's teeth that the crocodile doesn't bite because it saves the crocodile's teeth. I mean, you might not like it. I'm just brainstorming this as a possibility, just for consideration on the thing. But what if it is actually a good thing that we have some immigration that is noticeable because it prevents mouse utopia from fully forming? And what if it's a good thing that the chaos they cause riles up the people in a dying civilization who just lose the will to live otherwise? What if the horror, the terror, the injustice, all of it, and the wonder and the truth and the beauty is necessary, include the good and the bad, to prevent a dead, secular, godless, lack of will to live in the West? And I'm not suggesting that this is exactly the case entirely or unqualified wise. I'm definitely against the mass immigration, more or less. But I've been thinking about this, and I remember thinking about it myself like this, that mass immigration would stop one world government, and it would make a working class group that would finally fight the CIA and the one world government and globalists and so on. And in a way it did, by making the globalists support mass immigration to mass immigration's crimes, therefore rallying and riling up the people who were dead inside and numb to the erosion of liberties and power, power mongering of the globalists. So there's some truth to it regardless. But what a horrifying thought it would be that that was actually necessary to prevent mouse utopia. It's something to think on. And I'm not saying don't drive out the invaders now, but it might be worth it to keep some around so that they know why we fought them, so that our next generations know why we fought them in the first place. I'm not saying this is one big happy family logic, but it's kind of like C.S. Lewis saying he's a Democrat not because he believes in the inherent goodness of mankind, but because he doesn't believe anyone should be trusted with power singularly, right? It's kind of like that Scylla and Charybdis logic of like, if you go one way, you're totally dying off, and if you go the other way, it'll just eat you alive. And then like you go in between as close as possible, one way where you don't die off completely, but like the other thing only gets like a bit of you compared to if you were closer to it. And it's like threading the needle, or like the thin path. It's almost like Doctor Strange in Marvel Endgame, or Marvel Infinity War. Um, the second one of the Thanos series, the first one of the Thanos series, where Doctor Strange is looking into like a billion trillion timelines, and he sees only one path where they win, and it takes sacrifices, and they're not exactly the kinds you would like, typically speaking. It's almost like that, possibly. I want to stress that. But anyways, Mouse Utopia is the real scary part of all this stuff, by the way, and that's why I'm not a hippy dippy green ecology kind of person. I'm not a live and let live. Well, I am kind of, but like, I'm not I'm a spirited individual naturally, and I know that other people are less spirited, so they will fall to the dull gray goo sort of net. Like there's another version of this which is nanites, nanomachine, nanobots, where they just eat everything and replicate into themselves as a gray goo that overwhelms the entire world completely and just solidifies into a ball of identical atoms all throughout the planet. It's just uniform, there's nothing special, there's nothing new, it's just the same dead matter. And that's kind of what Mouse Utopia represents in a way. So it's almost like one might consider that one needs to take the highs and the lows to develop properly upwards, whereas the dead null state, or zero, is the stable state. So that might be some of the creative destruction of capitalism with the boom and bust and the market corrections and so on, as opposed to communism and so on. And it might be also why Isaac Asimov wrote the book The End of Eternity, where basically there's a there's a time travel and manipulation of the timeline agency that mellows out and levels everything, so it's not too good, not too bad, and just keeps society going along that not too good, not too bad path. And then it's found out that that path leads to all the other aliens in the galaxy colonizing the entire galaxy, and humanity stuck on Earth and dies off. But the other path of the extreme highs and lows leads to a gradual ascension over time where humanity dominates the galaxy. I'm I'm not suggesting that the left is particularly right about this stuff, but at the same time, I think we exist as a homeostatic equilibrium. For the most part. And some of these instincts exist for a reason. And I'm not going to totally write off the left as completely demonic all the time in everything they do, even if it's really messed up what they're doing in a way. But at the same time, I'm looking at the subconscious potential reasons for what they're doing. And like I'm not saying we copy them identically, but what I'm saying is if the right takes charge and acknowledges some of these parameters of possibility, then maybe they can skillfully manage the situation and account for it in a way that keeps them in power and keeps the left from growing, because more people know the right has all the good things of the left that the left could possibly have that's good, and none of the bad things. I'm not suggesting we move to the left necessarily exactly, but you know what I mean. This isn't I'll give one more example, by the way, to solidify this, so you know I'm not just like modern politicking it. In there's a okay. So first off, there's a quote misattributed to Hitler, which says he said, "I left some of them alive so you'd know why I killed them." But the answer to that is actually that it's a Roman quote or a Roman argument that someone made from Rome during the Carthaginian Wars, the Punic Wars, where they argued to keep Carthage alive as a rival to Rome so that Rome doesn't grow soft and decadent and dead inside with its spirit, so that it doesn't get overwhelmed by being weaker than it ever was before, eventually due to its strength and the laziness that strength gives, which leads to weakness. To keep them sharp, to keep them on edge. There's a Conan the Barbarian um, AI generated trailer for a movie called King Conan, um, which is like they forgot what fear was. I'll show them what fear is for. They chose comfort over blood. Yeah. And it's got like scheming, malicious court people undermining the kingdom, and it's got like invading barbarians and so on and so on. And I'm thinking about all this, and I'm thinking to myself, if we have kids, there's a hope for the future, and if they have kids, there's a hope for the future, and if they have kids, there's a hope for the future, and so on. Even if times are bad now. Personally, why I'm doing this is because I am looking for fame, fortune, and family. I'm not succeeding, but I might be helpful to people in a way, so I keep doing this anyways, because the goal is, even if I can't have children personally, my family will, and my blood will continue on through my family, who are my relations, who share some of my genetics. So even if not all my genetics continue, because I don't have kids, some of my genetics will, because I'm protecting the futures of my family. So that's my motivation. Very strong right-wing motivation. And the only reason why I don't have kids is because I'm not successful financially. I don't have a girlfriend. And this whole end of civilization thing has been bugging me ever since I was like 17 years old. And I'm almost 40 now. So, yeah. Preventing civilization's collapse takes priority for me over personally, over having a good life and having some kids, only to watch them die in the anarchy and chaos that ensues if I don't do anything. So, yeah, that's my motivation basically. So you don't have to look at me like necessarily as like one of those like, oh, I don't care what happens to my grandchildren things. It's literally like I'm not gonna have children until I know that I can, if I can, and if I don't, then I'll keep trying to make money, I'll keep trying to get a career and so on doing this. But even if I don't, I can be useful in protecting the future of my family that has children, my tribe that has children, my kin that have children, my countrymen that have children, my fellow nationals that have children, the bloodline, the extended bloodline, and extended relations. So yeah,